So that's the
Yeah.
process in a nutshell. Number one, start a podcast that appeals to our avatar as the guest and as the audience. Number two, find them and invite them to be guests on the podcast. Number three, interview them and convert those interviews into discovery calls. And then in our case, investors from that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Book More Show. It's Stuart Bell here, and today, great pleasure, joined by Dave Dubeau. Dave, how's it going, buddy?
It's going great. Good to see you again, Stuart, but you're putting my scruffy little beard to shame. So I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. I
I
think
don't know how I feel about that.
yours has developed a bit since last we spoke. So, mind you, they've both also going for that colour. So it's
I
I'm,
got you
I'm going
beaten.
for
I got you
distinguished.
beat the Silver Fox department, my friend.
It's catches up with all of us. This is going to be a cool show because there's a big crossover between what we do and what you do. We've obviously had a good few conversations in the past, but this is the first podcast that we're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really excited to share your story with people and then also really tie in the idea of having the book out there with the end product of how you serve. And as I say, as we'll get into what you do, it really is a big crossover for people. So, yeah, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
So,
Looking forward to it.
I know the Dave story, but let's start by sharing it with everyone else. Give people a bit of background on you and what it is you do.
Okay. So the big picture overview, I am up here in the great white north of British Columbia, Canada. Born and raised here after university, went and traveled the world a bit, lived overseas for about 14 years, 10 years of which were in San Jose, Costa Rica. Got married, had kids down there, had a business down there. That's where I kind of got into marketing and Dan Kennedy and all that kind of stuff that your partner, Dean Jackson, got into around the same time. So, anyhow, really got into the whole marketing thing. And then in about 2003, my Costa Rican wife and myself decided that it would be a better idea to raise our kids in Canada. And Canadians always go, tropical paradise, frozen hinterland. Why would you do that? Well, you don't realize what you got till you don't have it. So, Canada is
Yeah.
pretty awesome, especially for raising kids. So we packed everything up, moved to Canada. I had to start all over again from scratch. Didn't want to start another language training company, which is what I had in Canada and in Costa Rica. So I saw one of those late night infomercials. You too can get rich in real estate with little or no money down. I said, perfect. Because at that point, that's what I had after upending everybody and moving back to
It
Canada.
was
So
designed exactly for you.
yeah. So I got that course and put it to work and got into real estate, doing creative deals. Then I hooked up with a Canadian real estate guru, kind of a mini rich dad, poor dad kind of guy, and joined forces with him for a number of years as kind of his marketing dude and did that for quite a number of years. Then got back into real estate and one way or the other. Been in and around real estate since 2003. These days, what I really focus on a lot is I work with real estate syndicators, fund managers, professional capital raisers, and we help them to connect with what are called accredited investors so they can raise more money for their deals.
It's such a, I think many industries can think about the same scenario that the end users, the people who you're actually trying to interact with, aren't necessarily the people that you would think about at the first level. So drilling down to that accredited investor, the people who are interested in investments in the real estate space, the people who are interested, for your clients, interested in potentially a particular geographic area, we're kind of drilling down to who those people really are and the best way of interacting with them, as we'll
Yeah.
get into in a moment with the book and your approach generally. It's really interesting to kind of see one level kind of behind the curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz type thing. It's not necessarily the almighty Oz in front of the curtain, but it's the person pulling the levers behind the curtain. So
Exactly.
really, I think we're going to dive into this a little bit more. Your client sounds they're looking to engage with those accredited investors. Give us
Exactly.
a bit of the backstory on those people and what they've typically tried and what brings them to you look for another approach.
Yeah. So these real estate syndicators and fund managers are consistently trying to raise millions of dollars to fund their real estate deals. So, for example, if you think about a big apartment building, well, whoever built that needed to get, yes, the bank to finance them for a big chunk of it, but the down payment and a lot of the other costs, that they have to come up with that money themselves. So most people don't have that deep of pockets to bring up millions of dollars for that. So they go out and they raise capital to do these syndications or to, create a fund for these kind of development deals. And the Securities and Exchange Commission was created to protect the general public against getting scammed. So there are very tight criteria on who can and cannot invest in these kind of projects. So usually the uh, stipulation is for somebody to invest in one of these syndications, they need to be what's called an accredited investor. And that basically means they are high income, high net worth. So they're making at least 200 grand a year. They got $1 million in equity, excluding their private residence. So the government says, hey, you know what? These folks are sharp enough financially to take some risks that we won't let the general public do, so they can invest in these kind of deals. So, long story short, our syndicator clients and fund manager clients want to connect with these high net worth, high income individuals. And the way they've been trying to do it, it's so going to networking events. A lot of these guys and gals are going to real estate events and they're hobnobbing and schmoozing and pitching and all this kind of stuff, which is just kind of like that networking hell. And it's very
Yeah.
incestuous because everybody else there is trying to pitch people on their stuff. And it's just kind of gross. So networking is something that they try to do. They try coming up with lists and cold calling people and trying to get them interested in the deals. They try social media content creation, hamster wheel of hell, just coming up with stuff all the time to try and create engagement. But they have to be very careful. They can't cross the line and be soliciting directly online and that kind of stuff. So there's lots of rules and regulations around this. And it's just a very hit and miss kind of process for a lot of them, especially if they aren't, huge with hundreds and hundreds of existing investors that they can go back to and get referrals from and that sort of thing. So
Right.
those are the folks that
I
we're
think that's
working.
and that's interesting, isn't it? No matter who your target audience is, there is this problem of invisible prospects that you can't necessarily just go out and buy a list of these people, high net worth individuals. I've mentioned on the podcast before, my brother's a yacht broker for luxury yachts. Same deal. It's difficult to go
Yeah.
out and buy that list of people because they're trying to be obscured and they're hidden themselves behind gatekeepers. So whether you're at that end of the spectrum or at the higher volume but lower margin end of the spectrum, but still you're trying to identify those invisible people. It's almost like one of those, is it the Pachenko games, the Chinese games where you put the marbles in at the top and they go
Yeah.
ding,
Yeah.
ding,
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 and
ding, ding.
eventually, yeah, eventually something
They may
comes
or may
out.
not end up in the right spot. Right. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. If you've got 10 different holes and you're representing one of them, there's quite a lot of waste in that machine. And I think so much of the metrics are that, okay, that one, someone buying a yacht or someone investing in a syndication, it's worth the waste of the other stuff to get to those people. But if you can be more strategic about it and more direct, it just makes the amount of effort overall so much more targeted, meaning that you can be
Most
much
definitely.
more efficient. What's so let's bridge into your approach. Let's give people a bit of background on your particular approach, and then we can bridge into the book and how the book fits into that. Because again, whether you're looking for multi-million dollar accredited investors or whether you're looking for smaller but still invisible clients, I think it's very translatable.
Yeah. So we've got kind of a different approach, Stuart, one that you're very familiar with because we're on it right now. So the approach that we have, or the funnel that we create for our syndicator clients, is what I call a capital conversation and conversion podcast. So let's just zoom out. The big idea is that we start a podcast for them, their own podcast, that appeals directly to their ideal investor avatar. Everybody loves that word, avatar, right?
Right.
And it's not usually about real estate because if we think about it, we zoom out, most accredited investors, people that are making that kind of money, have that kind of net worth, they're either successful business owners who are making good money and have a lot of wealth in their business, or they are successful professionals, aka doctors, dentists, lawyers, CPAs with their own firms, those kind of people that have been in business for a while, paid off the student loans, and now they're doing good, or they are C-suite executives of big companies, so typically 300 employees up if we're talking to the CEO or the CFO or COO or founder of those kind of companies, chances are they probably fit the criteria of an accredited investor. Now, these guys and gals are not out directly looking for real estate investing podcasts. They may or may not be aware of it as an asset class. They certainly aren't spending their time listening to these kind of real estate podcasts about how syndications work and blah, blah, blah. So we want to create a podcast that appeals to them, number one, to be a guest of the podcast. We want to go skip straight to the front of the line and invite them to be a guest on the podcast so that we can start that conversation, start that relationship, right? And then we also want to attract those kind of people as the audience members of the podcast as well. So kind of a double whammy. So that's step number one. Let's build out a podcast that's appealing to our investors. Step number two, let's find them and invite them to be guests on the podcast. Now, this is kind of cool because, you know, you and I are used to podcasts, Stuart, and it's not that big of a deal. You're doing them every week. I do 10 to 12 interviews every week. So it's not that
You
big of
get
a deal
used
for
to
us.
it.
But it's amazing how few of these people, high level people, successful people, have ever been invited to be a guest on a podcast before. So it's kind of a big deal for them. It's an honor. And it's a way for us to lead with the giving hand by providing value first, right? So we invite them, they come on the show, we make them look good and sound good and feel good because it's not a 60 minutes expose grill them kind of thing. It's
There's
a
no
friendly,
gotcha in there. It's
yeah,
all
it's, hey,
friendly.
what's your secret sauce? And professionally, what do you do differently? What do you find that works well? So just kind of getting that, how do you balance work life and family life? How do you keep that balance? And then we, you know, for our clients, we transition towards the financial side. And hey, Dr. Smith, chances are it sounds like you're doing really well with your practice right now. A lot of doctors in your position are looking at, you know, in the future when they don't want to be slicing and dicing people so much anymore, and they want to keep that income level up, but they don't want to work so hard for it. They're kind of looking at what does that look like for themselves and their families in the future. What are your thoughts about that? So just kind of open things up to if they're doing anything around investing. And then step number three is convert those interviews into investment discovery calls, right? So at the end of the interview, you're done with the interview, then it's, hey, Dr. Smith, great interview. By the way, you mentioned you're starting to dabble in crypto or whatever they talked about. If you don't mind me asking, how do you feel about the kind of returns you're getting with that, the stability and the security of that investment? Is that something that you're 100% happy with, or is there maybe a little room for improvement? I don't care who you're interviewing, Stuart. I get to interview Warren Buffett. He's going to say there's always room for improvement. Okay, cool. Well, we're doing something really interesting with other doctors just like yourself who are really busy in the alternative investing space with apartment buildings. The great thing is we're able to get them very solid double-digit returns on their money and at the same time reduce their personal taxes dramatically. Is that something you might be interested in taking a look at? Boom, book them into a follow-up discovery call. So that's the
Yeah,
process in a nutshell. Number one, start a podcast that appeals to our avatar as the guest and as the audience. Number two, find them and invite them to be guests on the podcast. Number three, interview them and convert those interviews into discovery calls. And then in our case, investors from that. Does that make sense, Stuart?
absolutely. And it's such a perfect example and complementary service to what we do. So, as you say, we run our own podcasts, have done for years and years. We do some client ones, but we don't particularly talk about it. It's not really something that we advertise. The ones that we do just come out with the back of books because of the natural transition from someone
Yeah,
writing the book in the subject and having that as the attention grabbing piece at the top of the funnel through to the
for sure.
podcast, which is then content exactly the same way that we use them to keep people engaged over the long term. So I wanted to drill down on a couple of things that you were talking about because for most of the podcasts that we're talking with people about, either the ones that we're individually running or the ones where people have got them, but we're talking about them as the tie into the book, very few are using them as specific opportunities to talk to an individual and then having that bridging conversation. So I think
Yeah,
the
lead
interesting thing
generating.
that, yeah, on a one-to-one element with the actual guests themselves, we're very much using it as content creation for the broader conversation to the wider audience. But what I really like about your approach is because you're dealing with a small number of very specific individual clients, you're much more line fishing one-on-one with people rather than net fishing and trying to get that group.
Yeah. Well, I've
So
been doing the podcast thing myself, Stuart, since 2018, which is a long time in podcast years. And at the beginning, I did it for those exact same reasons. Like, well, podcasting was starting to become a thing. And I thought, like everybody, hey, if I put out a podcast there and I interview the big wigs, in my case, in the real estate industry, then hopefully some of them will share the podcast with their audiences. And somehow I'll grow this big audience. And somehow some of those people will figure out I'm a smart guy and reach out to me somehow and maybe want to have a conversation about my services. And it's a great way to create content, right? So those were my goals at the beginning. So I was doing the normal thing, like a weekly kind of podcast whenever I got around to it, or twice a
right,
month or twice a week sometimes. It was very hit and miss. And then credit where credit's due, about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, I was listening to a podcast, and this young smart Brit guy named Jamie Atkinson talked about this whole idea. Instead of trying to grow an audience with your podcast, which is great, but that's a vanity metric, really. It makes no difference unless you can monetize it. Instead of focusing on the audience growth, just focus on interviewing the exact kind of people you want to work with and convert those conversations into sales conversations afterwards, right? Give them the full value
right.
of the interview of the podcast, but don't be so focused on audience growth and all of this kind of crap that most podcasters are focused on.
This
Because yeah, but very few of
just
us are going to
numbers.
compete against Joe
Yeah,
Rogan or any of those big guys. We're not going to
right.
monetize our podcast that way, right? Most of us,
Yeah,
but we can monetize it big time by flipping it on the head and just really focusing on who is your ideal guest, get them on the show, make them look good, make them sound good, make them feel good, create that rapport, create that relationship, and then see if there's a potential connection between what you do and what they need. And boom,
yeah.
there you go.
We had just to double tap into the double tap. That's not the word I mean. Just to dive into that point that you were talking about, the numbers. The same with the books. We're not interested in book sales because
Exactly.
we're business owners. We're not authors. We don't
Yeah.
care about the sales themselves. One actual client is going to be worth way more than any number of books that are sold. So rather than getting caught up in the vanity metrics of traditional publishing, we're using the books to start those real conversations. So diving into what you were talking about in the addressing your ideal avatar, the target market, the people who you're really trying to speak to, I
Yeah.
think not only have you got that opportunity of the one-on-one conversation with people who might be investors, there's also the opening the door of other clients. So we have some books and a podcast with a good friend who owns a tax practice, and the tax practice is specifically around the IC disc, which is a very niche exporter focused tax strategy in the US.
Right.
So he's been doing the podcast for 5 or 6 years. They only do a monthly show. They've got a super low cadence, but they have had some great success in reaching out to other partners and industry experts, and not necessarily influencers in the sense that they'll share the podcast and the podcast is the thing that they're interested in, but it starts the conversation with other professionals within the environment, where
Yeah.
to try and get a conversation with that person otherwise might be pretty difficult, because if we go to network events, everyone's at network events. If you try
Yeah.
and arrange to meet someone specifically, our calendars don't always align. But like you say, for most people, they're not getting invited to podcasts all the time. The cohort of people where that happens,
Ever.
they're kind of,
Ever.
yeah, very,
Yeah.
very slim. So to be able to have that as a door opener, one of the book products that we've got a couple of different tiers of book products. One of the slightly higher tier one, we've got a
I know I'm
specific.
one of your customers, Stuart.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and we'll bridge into the book in a second
Yeah.
for sure, because again, that crossover in how the podcast is being used and how the book is being used, so complementary. But on one of the slightly higher tier products, we've got like a hardback book methodology that we talk about. And again, nothing to do with selling books, nothing to do with whether it's on Amazon or not, nothing to do with book signings, because who cares? That's all traditional stuff.
Yeah.
But a hardback version, if you're trying to open a door to specific, most people could probably identify the top 50 or top 100 clients who they were their wish list of ideal clients. So using the hardback cover, personal note in it, send that across, follow up with a phone call, and that phone call much more likely to be get picked up and taken rather than just an
Definitely.
out of the blue call. So those two things, whatever the mechanism is, whatever the vehicle is, podcast, book, any other idea that you could come up with, it's the outcome, the conversation that's the important thing, not the vehicle in its own right. So it's such a
Exactly.
great leveraging of something that is out there and getting some attention, but in a very different way. So
Most
the clients that you're working with, then the syndication, the syndicators, if that's the right
syndicators. Yep.
term. Yeah,
Yep.
syndicators. It's not like they're doing this idea already and then they're coming to you just because they're trying to make it easier or looking for efficiencies in the podcasting world. So as you're talking to people, what's the bridge between syndicators trying the traditional things and then you introducing the idea of the podcast? Is that a light bulb moment for many people and there's an immediate realization? Or is it that they think of podcasts maybe in a traditional sense and then they're kind of a little bit gun shy, thinking, are you trying to tell them to be the next Joe Rogan of the syndication world?
Yeah, it's usually a light bulb moment. And the way I explained it is we aren't trying to be a Joe Rogan in the syndication world. And, our outcome, because we provide a done for you turnkey service for our clients where we build them their podcast, we fill it up with their ideal avatar as guests, and we do all the production stuff behind the scenes for them. So they just show up on Zoom a couple of times a week and have conversations, right? So it's a very and it's very clearly spelled out. This is a direct lead generation mechanism. There will be an audience, there will be audience growth. It'll be organic. We don't pay any attention to that. We focus on who we get as your guests, and that's all you should really focus on. Now, is it a happy byproduct that sometimes some of our clients get audience members reaching out to them, starting that? We just had one client raise $75,000 from an audience member who'd been listening to their podcast for a while and said, "Hey, this, Matt's pretty sharp when it comes to real estate. It sounds like maybe I'll reach out to him." They did. They connected. Boom. That turned into a $75,000 what's called limited partner in one of his syndications. So, but that's not the focus. The focus is let's connect with our ideal avatar as a guest on the show. And the beautiful thing is about this, Stuart, is it flips the switch, right? So, I mean, if somehow you manage to book a sales meeting traditionally with one of these kind of people through networking or cold calling or whatever, then you show up for that meeting. You're the one that's nervous. You're the one that's kind of under the microscope. You're the one
Right.
that's feeling all the
Or yeah,
pressure, right?
yeah.
This turns it around. They're coming to you excited to be a guest on your show. They're the ones that's feeling a little bit nervous, a little shy, a little unsure of themselves, even though they might. Had one guy runs $1 billion fund. Okay. Never been invited to be a guest on a podcast before. Very nervous when my client was, you know, having a little conversation with them before they started the interview. So that's an awesome way. You put the person at ease. You have a wonderful conversation, a nice interview. At the end of it, they feel good. You've made them look
Yeah.
good. You shine the spotlight on them. You allowed them to strut their stuff because even super successful people, they don't get much recognition at work. They get even less recognition at home. So this is, it really is an instant rapport builder. So you cut right through that, no like and trust factor, just fast forwards that so much. So by the end of the podcast, if you do it right, they know you and they like you because you've made them feel good. It's working nicely towards the trust factor, and then it makes it so much easier to get them booked into a quote unquote sales call after that, a discovery call, we call that.
I think when you think about the relationship building, we, for the longest time, so we have the similar challenges on the book business in the sense that when you say book, everyone immediately thinks of a traditional book. When you say
Yeah.
podcast, everyone immediately thinks of NPR
Tradition.
or Joe Rogan type.
Yeah, Joe
Yeah.
Rogan. Yeah, that's
So,
what it is.
yeah, bridging that gap to say, hey, no, we're looking for all of the benefits and the credibility and the authority of those things, but in a very different way. So, for a couple of years now, I really double down on putting the phrase of conversation starting book versus traditional book as a kind of a hook, a name to help people separate out the two things. And the idea of having a relationship building podcast, not a media
Audience
type
building.
podcast. Right. Yeah, exactly. Relationship building, not audience building. That's the perfect distinguishing because it allows people in a relatively easy way to think about what those differences are and come into it with a premise of a podcast, but not without all of the baggage of an audience building podcast. It helps kind of break that mold a little bit. The idea is that relationship building, so at the end of that, who cares about the audience? The relationship with that individual is at a completely different level, and the likelihood of them remembering you, even if they're not an ideal client themselves, they're swimming in the pool of other ideal clients. So the
Yeah.
likelihood of them remembering a 60-minute long friendly conversation versus a 5-minute long pitch, I mean, the difference in the quality of the relationship, not only immediately, but in the long term,
Well, not
hugely
only that,
different.
Stuart, but we take it to the next level. So, yeah, we don't charge the guest anything to be a guest on the show,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And we also, I have my team take each episode and slice out 3 or 4 short form videos, the reels or the shorts, whatever you want to call them, with the subtitles on them. And then we take the
Yeah.
transcript of the conversation, put it through ChatGPT, create LinkedIn articles, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, all these kind of social media content. And then we deliver that to the guest when their episode is released. So that way they can leverage their appearance on the show. And then selfishly, it helps us to grow the show organically because guess who they're going to
Yeah.
share that with?
Yeah.
Their sphere, right? Guess who are in
Yeah.
their sphere? Lots of other people just like them, right? So this is a way for them to kind of brag themselves up a little bit, strut their stuff a little bit, and organically it helps us to grow the audience as well.
And you can imagine someone who is less sophisticated than you are in terms of thinking about the job of work, the conversation, they would clip it up, but it would be very much focused on the audience building podcast host. So it would be about the show and about the host and about what they want. That's what you see a lot of the time. The sophisticated approach that you've got of knowing that it's about the conversation and the relationship and not about the audience means that you can clip those up in a way that promotes the guest and makes them look good. And knowing that they're rarely guests, if at all, on things, I mean,
Yeah.
taking all of those clips and really, what's a more polite way of blowing smoke, in the most authentic way possible and useful
Yeah.
way possible. The job is to make them look as good as possible, so they're
Yeah.
super enthusiastic about sharing it.
That's
It
the whole
that
goal. Let's make them look good.
that one
Well,
more
we
step.
we do 2 things, Stuart. So we create a version for the guest. We also create a version for the client so that they
Right.
can use that if they want as content because most people hate creating content on social media and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like a done for you content machine for them as well.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is why I was so excited about sharing the show, because the overlap of what you do with a podcast as a vehicle and what we do with a book as a vehicle, so complementary, and we come to it from the same perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have similar conversations. People talk about AI as a one-click button, a one-click solution. I don't need to think about any of this. I'll just a one-line prompt into GPT and it will spit out all of this magic stuff and job done. But the reality of that is, even if it's successful, which honestly it isn't that successful doing it, taking that approach, even if it was, what gets put out is generic stuff. The benefit of having a podcast, the benefit of having a book is that you can use AI to leverage everything that you've done as an individual. So that is a game changer because its
Yeah.
ability to leverage it is second to none, just the efficiencies and the
Oh,
quality,
we
which
could not do what we do without AI,
right.
but AI is a tool. It's not, we don't use AI to create content from scratch. We use AI to transform existing content into different
Yeah.
kinds of content, right? So,
Because what you're doing is amplifying them, amplifying the author, amplifying the host, and going up from there rather than just a generic pool of stuff. And the
yeah,
ability to knowing that the outcome for both of us is the conversation and the relationship leverage in the podcast and the conversation opportunity from the book, knowing that
mhm,
the job of work, the outcome is those conversations, not the vehicle itself. The fact that we're leveraging and amplifying what our individual clients say means that when they eventually get round to having a conversation with the real person, whether it's the guest on the podcast or, like you were saying, the audience member, where previously they had no relationship with them at all, but the audience member is coming to the conversation feeling like they know them already. Same for a book. If someone's read the some at least of your book, or all of it, they're coming to that conversation feeling like there's more of a relationship, just so much more effective than just some generic push button stuff that everyone else is doing.
Well, the other thing is like a book and a podcast. A book is such a powerful tool to get booked on podcasts, right? So, I mean, all of your clients, myself included, like we're getting our book made by you guys. That's great. We're getting a landing page, and we're pushing traffic to that landing page. A fantastic way to push traffic is to get booked on other people's podcasts to talk about your book, to push people to the book website to opt in to get your book, right? Does that make sense? So,
Yeah,
so a
yeah.
book gives you a perfect vehicle to have something to talk about that's interesting and timely on somebody else's podcast, and to then leverage their audience to get them to opt in for your book. So they work so nicely
It's
together. They really do.
it's such a fantastic closed loop system,
Yeah.
because people, podcast hosts, want to have an easy way of saying yes to you as a guest. If you're promoting, or if you're out there in the world, they want an easy way of saying, yes, I want to speak to that person. The book demonstrates your knowledge and the framework and what you're going to talk about. So everyone's joining the conversation as it's been recorded, knowing what the edges of the conversation are. It's not, oh, we're going to have this person on as a guest, and then I don't know what to talk about after a couple of minutes, or
Yeah, exactly.
the roadmap is already laid out.
Yeah.
And as you say, from the audience's perspective, I don't know about you, but I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts on the move, and I'm doing things. And then sometimes I'll tune back in and 5 minutes have passed and I've kind of missed it because I got distracted with something else. But if something resonates and I'm interested, knowing that there's then an easy next step in the book blueprint scorecard, the book that I use personally most of the time now, it's the 8 steps of a business building book. One of those is the minimum viable commitment. It's the smallest next step that you can expect someone to take at this part of the relationship. And when you
Yeah.
think about a book as something that a podcast guest can download, podcast listener can download, just such a logical next step. It's a closed loop. It's all a series of mini steps towards that conversation.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. No, it works
complementary.
beautifully. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so we should talk about your book then. So your approach, you've been doing this for a while now. The book's coming together as that opportunity to help people raise their hand and say, "Oh, this is interesting." Talk
Yeah.
quickly about the content of the book and what brought you to the point of, "Hey, I've got all of these ideas. They really should be on the pages."
Well, I drank the Kool-Aid about using books as glorified business cards years and years ago. If people are watching this, they might see that I got a bookshelf full of my own books in the back. I think this one with you guys was like number 8 or number 9. So I'd done them all kind of traditional ways in the past. The first book I was part of was a really crappy anthology book promoted by a marketing guru. So like 37 of us all contributed our own little crappy chapters to this thing, and we all got our
Yeah,
cover and all that kind of stuff. And it was, the book itself was absolute crap, but it was something you could show people.
it
And
did
then I'd
something.
start
Yeah,
doing my own things and all this kind of stuff, and writing my own books the hard way, and then getting a little smarter about it. But yeah, the most recent book, I said, you know what? I'm gonna, I've known Stuart and Dean for a long time. I like the whole 90-minute book idea. I get it. I like the idea of other people interviewing me, because that's how I've written a few of my books, is just kind of talking it through and then turning the content into the book. But I thought, hey, a lot easier, faster, get you guys to do it than doing it myself. So that's why I went with you guys. Very happy with the end result as well. And just getting it, all the nitpicky stuff, getting it set up in Amazon and all that crap that I really don't want to figure out again, because it's been a while since I did it last time. So yeah, that's why I went with you guys. Really good value, very good system as well. Just to give you a little plug there. So my book is 100% dialed in for my target avatar, which is real estate syndicators and fund managers. So the title is How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month. That's the title of it. So it's a how-to book. Subtitle is Without Cold Calling, Networking, or Chasing People, right? So that's what it's all about. The book itself is your typical, it walks people through step by step exactly what we do when we work with a client to go from zero, not having a podcast, to building that podcast out, making sure it attracts their ideal avatar as the guest and as the listener, then how to find those people and invite them to be a guest on the podcast, how to do those interviews and convert those interviews into investment meetings, how to, some of the techie, a little bit of the techie stuff on how to do some of the stuff or how to outsource that, which is a much better idea. So yeah, it's really A to Z process on what we do. And then the big red easy button is, hey, if you want it all done for you, let's have a talk, right? So it really is to educate
Yeah.
people about the big idea of why this is such a great way to connect with people. You don't have to chase them, you don't have to cold call them, you don't have to network and schmooze. You attract these people, and they're actually excited to meet you because you're interviewing them on
Such
a
a difference.
podcast.
Yeah, such a difference. I always ask people, we've been in business for a number of years, all of us, we could talk at length about what we do. I always find it interesting to ask people, how do they go about deciding, and obviously people working with us, we guide them quite a lot in this, but how do you go about deciding what to include and what not to include? Because obviously if you try and include everything, it could be war and
Yeah,
peace, and the audience probably aren't that interested in the nuts and bolts
yeah.
of some of it anyway. So how do you go through picking which are the important pieces to put into the book and then which lives outside of the book?
Yeah, well, my book's pretty short and sweet. I think it's like 67 pages or something like that. So it's definitely not, super in depth. I think what I did was I'd done a webinar about the whole process before. So I basically kind of used that as the outline and then worked with your people on, massaging their questions and kind of answering them using that outline, which again gives
Yeah,
the big broad strokes without going into the minutia. So
yeah.
yeah, I've been doing this
I
kind of stuff for a long time, Stuart. So I learned a long time ago, most people don't want the minutia. They want, myself included. Like if I'm
and
doing something new, I don't want to know all the nitpicky details. I want to know, okay, what's the gist of this? How does it work? Does it make sense? And can somebody else do this damn thing for me? Right?
I
That's what
think
I'm looking for.
particularly because a traditional book, the product is the book. People are buying the book for the words that are on the page. A conversation starting book, their outcome is a conversation. So the job of work of the book is just to get to the conversation and
Yeah.
trying to deliver everything in the pages, particularly when people aren't interested, people aren't buying these books for entertainment. The job isn't to share something that will distract someone for a period of time whilst they're doing something else. It's to help them fix a problem. And the fixing the problem, 9 times out of 10, really for most people, is okay, you've got to get me to do it for you, or you've got to get someone to do it for you. So the scope of it is really getting to that first point of the conversation and getting to the first point of the conversation with people feeling like they've got value at the place that they are and they're not just bait and switched into a meeting. So there's definitely
Right.
some content there, but it's not the be all and end all. I think too many people approach book writing in the traditional sense and thinking that they've got to put absolutely everything in there, which is very far from the
Yeah. Well, I mean,
truth.
you guys have got all the stats on how many books actually get sold of those books, how many actually get opened of those that get opened, how many actually get read all the way through.
Yeah.
It's
And
minuscule. And
that's
that's for
for
books that are,
majoritively,
yeah.
I think we are just going to say the same thing. That's for majoritively traditional books where the entire purpose is that it's read and still the readership rate. Last year, I kind of think about this problem a little bit more and trying to help people contextualize the conversation starting book versus the traditional book. I started describing it in terms of a presentation because that seems to be the best way to help people think about the overall idea that we're
Yeah.
doing. So saying to someone, okay, let's imagine that next Tuesday, I can get you in front of 100 of your ideal clients. So between now and Tuesday, let's work on the presentation together. And in the presentation, in the auditorium, I'll be there to ask you the questions to help you deliver the best answers to this very specific audience. So, okay, what would we do? Well, we probably wouldn't just turn up on Tuesday and wing it because
Yeah.
wasted opportunity. I mean, we probably could because we've been doing it long enough, but wasted opportunity. So we would think, okay, who's the audience in there and what do we really want them to do? So what's the outcome? We want them to come to the back of the room and talk to us afterwards about this specific thing. Okay, so we know what the next step is. Okay, so what are we going to title the presentation so that they come to our talk and not to someone else's talk? Okay, we'll pick something that resonates with them and pushes a few buttons. We'll amplify it a little bit with a subheading that gets the juices going a little bit more. The
Yeah.
slides in the presentation will be the 5 or 6 things because we know attention is limited. It'll be the 5 or 6 things that really, again, take them from the problem to the idea that there is a solution. And then the next step is go to the back of the room. So the big text on the slides would be the attention grabbing things that move them down. Okay, well,
Yeah, the
what
chapters.
questions would we ask? Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
the chapters. What questions would we ask? Well, we drill into these a little bit more. Again, we know that attention is limited, so we'll just hit on those main points. And all of that framework, if you take it away from a presentation and into a book, the methodology is exactly the same. We're trying to do that thing to capture people's attention span when they've got lots of other things that they could be doing, introduce the conversation enough so that they take that next step, which is go to the back of the room. In that case, the presentation has done its job. The same with the book, and the same to a certain degree with the podcast. What I really like about podcasts is it gives you an easy way, because most of us don't have a problem talking, as we can tell by our podcast. Most of us can talk about this stuff. So the great thing about a podcast is it's very easy to keep that conversation going for week after week, month after month, so that because we know that it's the majority of people who are ready to act today, most people are ready to act tomorrow. So it really gives us the opportunity to stay in touch with the long term, because we can send people those emails saying, hey, just released another show. It's great. We were talking to Dave about using podcasts as a way of engaging people.
Yeah.
By the way, here's the next step you can take today.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. Yeah. For me, the whole book idea, I agree with you guys. It really has, I mean, you don't want the content to be crap. You want it to be good. The
Yeah,
real goal of the book is to get that opt-in, get the name and the email address, and start that communication. For me, the secondary goal of the book is a way to get in front of other people's audiences, right? So
right.
I'll give you a perfect example. So we've got some Facebook ads going out to promote, and they're working okay. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. It's relatively new, early days for us in that, but let's say we're getting, I don't have, I'm not spending a huge budget, $500 a month kind of thing. And I think last month might have got less than 100 opt-ins, I think, but maybe let's say it's 100 opt-ins. So it's $5 a pop, whatever. However, I went on one podcast and promoted the book, and it wasn't a huge podcast, like 75 opt-ins from that directly, right? Now we have
Right.
early days to see which convert better and all that kind of stuff. But bam, that's just that made up the work of a month of Facebook ads in almost in one podcast appearance. So
Yeah.
for me, using the book, my main goal these days is to use it for leverage to get in front of other people's audiences, to do podcast swaps with other podcasters who have stuff. So it just really it's another tool in the toolbox to make everything work. And yeah, I can tell
Yeah.
you, being an author, even though there are so many of us, it still is kind of a big deal, especially if you just don't have some AI created piece of crap.
And I think exactly. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing going forward is we see we're interested in writing books, we're interested in running podcasts for people. So we're in that world. We see we're disproportionately skewed to seeing more of those things because we're in that space. When
Yeah.
you look at the entire audience, it's still a tiny minority of people who have a book, tiny minority, tiny percentage of people who have a book, tiny, but even probably smaller percentage that have a podcast. So to enable that for other people and to have it as a difference maker, and particularly a difference maker with the whole purpose of it being a conversation starter, because if those
Mhm.
subsets of people, it's a tiny group of people who have a podcast. It's an even smaller group of people who are having a relationship building podcast. Most of them are thinking about it as an audience building podcast, which is, as we said, is missing the point. So to be able to orchestrate that journey, it's such a benefit and adds another string to the bow in a way that's easy to do, because for us, people come to us, we take 90 minutes of the time thereabouts to create the book. For you, people just have to turn up, like you say in the book, turn up in a clean shirt and have some questions to
And
mind
a
to
smile
ask
and
them.
remember to click record. That's their main job. Yeah.
It's so funny that you say that. I've touch wood have never yet not clicked record, but at the end of every show, particularly we record on Zoom, so particularly now where they change the interface and the record button is sometimes not quite as obvious as it could be, it's always a moment of panic at the end of every show to make sure that I definitely click it. But yeah, going in with that, it's easy for people to do, and it gives them a whole other avenue to leverage. So like you say, the Facebook ads will keep running them because it's direct targeted traffic to the group. But being on a podcast, I mean, how easy is it that? And to get access to that audience, we have, and again, I don't want to suggest that this is indicative in any way, but we were running some book ads for someone at the moment. We've been running them for, I think we're probably about 3 months in. And the cost per click, cost per lead, so we run lead ads in Facebook so the lead
Yeah.
details come straight through. So the cost per click of those over the 3 month, it's 68 cents. 68 cents a
Nice.
lead. I mean, insane. And again, that's unimaginably low compared with a lot of the other ones. So I don't want to suggest that's indicative. But it's an easy step for people to take. The click a button and download a book. There's not much barrier to entry to that. Go on a podcast, and how many times do you see guests on podcasts and the host will say, "Oh, where can people find out more?" And they'll generically say, "Oh, go to the website or follow me on X or something."
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
specifically saying, "Hey, that's great. We've talked about the framework here. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. So just go grab a free copy of the book, and if you're interested in it, learn more." Such a
Yeah.
great closed loop. I think it's become a bit of a trope. I end every podcast by looking up at the clock and realizing how
Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
time
Time flies when we're
goes.
having fun, my friend.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be really great to circle back in a couple of months and talk a little bit more about the book's relatively new. We've just wrapped it up recently, but we can talk a little bit more about how you're using it to attract that audience in the different ways. So Facebook ads, see what's happening there, and the guest opportunity on podcasts. So that would be super interesting. I want to make sure that people can follow along a little bit more with what it is that you do. So where's a good place for people to go and find
Well,
out more
I
about
on
this?
any podcast where I send them is to go get a copy of the book. So again, the book is How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month. And the website is 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com. And 20 is the number 20. So 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com.
Fantastic. It almost seems like this was planned, like we knew what we were doing, but the whole demonstration of pointing someone to the book website after being on a podcast, it's perfectly coherent. I love it. I'll make sure that we put a link straight to that as well in the show notes. So whether people are listening on a podcast player or on the website, it'll just be one click through and go straight to it. Such a great crossover in the two approaches. And I think as people are listening, whether they're thinking about um, as I think about getting in front of those audiences, whether they're thinking the book is a great idea or the podcast is a great idea, I think take the vehicle out of it, think about the framework first, this opportunity that we're both promoting to people of saying, focus on the conversation, because that's what makes the difference. The books are just such a perfect blend of
They
following
definitely are.
through. So yeah,
Yeah. Well,
really want to thank
thanks
you
so
for your
much for having
time.
me on the
It's
show, Stuart. I really appreciate it.
real pleasure. We'll definitely circle back and go a bit deeper into some of the lead pieces next time. But everyone, thanks again for listening. Definitely recommend going across to Dave's website and pulling the podcast opportunity because some great insights into using that to start conversations. And if you've been thinking about creating a book for your own lead generation tool, just either hit reply to the email that goes out with this or follow the links in the show notes and we'll be able to help you get that sorted out. Thanks again for listening. Dave, thanks for being a guest, and we'll catch everyone in the next one.